Welcome to the Chicago Home Partner Podcast. I'm Samuel Shahan, along with my co-host Amanda McMillan. We discuss the Chicago real estate market. Our goal is to educate you on what's actually happening out there and how it impacts your real estate goals.
We're back.
Welcome to our annual market report, I guess.
This is our special feature. This is our one time a year where we put ourselves on the chopping block. Our special feature, our market report, essentially, where we go back, we look at all the predictions we made at the beginning of 2023. How the hell did that year go by so quickly?
I have no idea.
Me either. But anyways, we're going to go back. We're going to take a look at what we predicted, what we said, how well we did, and how poorly we did. We totally got certain things really, really wrong.
Yeah.
And then we're going to spend the second half of our time together making our predictions for...
Predicting the future for 2024.
Let me look into my crystal ball. I don't know how that happens, that the years keep coming and I feel like I don't age at all.
You're doing great.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you. I set you up to give me that compliment, so I appreciate that.
I started Botox in 23, so that's how I'm staying young.
See, I fully believe that. And the dermatologist that I go to, who is the best in the city, Dr. Jordan Corkerville, anyways, she told me that the younger you start, the better it is and the less often you have to do it.
Oh, well, that's good.
So since you're a young, you're a young pup, so it's a good thing to do.
Starting young.
Anyways, as we said, this feature is going to be us taking a look at our 2023 report card, grading ourselves on all of the hot topics, and then looking forward to the future. So let's just dive in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, our first prediction is the biggest one that everyone wants to know.
Home sales.
Home prices.
Pricing. Yes.
Right? That's what everyone wants to know, is how much more or less is their home worth. Now, just as some logistical pieces, right? We always say, we did separate things into the kind of the three categories that we look at. We are going to concentrate on the neighborhoods where we do the majority of our business, which is in, kind of the north and northwest sides of the city, including the Loop in downtown. We have an overall snapshot of it, but then we also digest things as more of what we call the urban neighborhoods, sans downtown and the more concrete areas, and then we do the downtown market as well.
Yeah, because then you also have the high rise versus kind of like walk-ups and neighborhoody feels.
Yes, so we did, and we definitely saw a lot of differences in those this year.
Totally.
Okay, so on the home pricing side, our prediction, do you remember?
I think we said it would go slightly up or be flat.
Let's see, we basically said home prices should see a slight increase or be flat in the appreciation over 2022.
Yeah, I think we actually did pretty well on this one.
We actually knocked this one out of the park, I think. Overall, in terms of the areas that we take a look at, we saw a 0.2% increase in home values. Okay, so you and I both always say anytime we're looking at stats and numbers and those types of things, there's going to be a lot of variables in it. We always talk about a little bit of a buffer. I usually say anything up or down about 2% is fairly flat in my mind, but you're almost as flat can be.
Yes, I think that is awesome, especially since other markets have seen like depreciation with interest rates going up so much because they saw such high like appreciation prior to us. So our little steady engine that does is keep on going.
Keep it on. And I think that's a really important note for us, right? We talk about that a lot. Is that there are ways to outperform the market in more challenging times, right? Sales can be down, but we also compare to different types of markets. And even within certain markets, it's going to be very, very different. So when a lot of the country had a lot of sour news this year, we were just doing what we do and we kept on keeping on.
Over the last 5 years, in the case price Schiller index, we've been the last place out of all the major metropolitans in terms of growth.
Right.
And this year we were on top 4 months in a row. Now last month we did take a little bit of a tumble, but now we're number 3, which is still like insane.
Huge.
Because Chicago typically is again at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, we typically don't lead those lists by any means, but it's as we always say, and even when the water got a little bit choppy last year, we said this is where us being stable is going to be our major asset.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dissect that a little bit more.
Northside versus downtown.
Okay, so the Northside saw a little bit more appreciation, which we tend to see and we projected. we saw that in those Northside neighborhoods, property values went up about 2.6%. Fine number, right? Yeah, absolutely fine. When the market is more challenged, we're doing things a little bit tougher to see that steady appreciation, which is great.
Yep.
We had a lot of challenging news come out in the middle of the year. We weathered a lot of storms, and to still end up ahead, which is what we thought we were going to see, is a good thing.
Yeah. And I mean, like, the other thing also with like the numbers that we kind of like talked about even on our last podcast was the amount of transactions, us being down, is also affecting these numbers. So, you know, certain price points may have gone up even more, or some certain price points may have gone down more, but because there's less data, each individual point
for certain
is
you're jumping ahead to the next. You're jumping ahead, Samuel, to the next one.
I know.
But yeah, no, absolutely. The point basically is in these years that we have less statistical data because we have less home sales, because we have less inventory and less of everything. Every point is more impactful. Yeah. So that can definitely skew. Or give us, what do they say, like a higher handicap? Is that the sports terminology, or at least the golf terminology?
Yes.
So now the downtown market, your hood.
So that's my hood, and my hood unfortunately did see a decrease, and it was down by 8.2%, which is not bad, but it's still a lot. So again, it's really interesting to see. Yeah,
and that's one of those things that we've talked a lot about, is that the downtown has definitely taken a lot of steps forward in the last couple of years, but the downtown did get rocked. I mean, the good news is that we've gotten this far into the podcast and we haven't mentioned COVID yet once, but the downtown is still finding its way in a post-COVID world.
Yeah, and like the other thing about downtown, I feel like, is there's so many price points, which is really affecting it, especially when you come look at like average price. Yeah. Like, we may not have seen a ton of higher end condos, which increases that average, where, I mean, you look at like the $1 million below, inventory is actually actually catching up. Yes. And so, you know, where we were prior, it's insane. So.
And once again, our disclosure is this is not saying that every home in the downtown area just lost this. Samuel has a great point. There are certain years where our luxury market does fantastic, and that can give a little bit of a false read, versus this year where we actually saw certain parts of our luxury market were a little bit more stagnant.
Yeah.
So,
well, and also last year, didn't we have like 2 luxury buildings that finished out their sales for like new construction, which also sent out a lot of higher end inventory, because those are the buildings that are selling right now.
Once again, those higher end data points.
That could also be another factor into it.
For certain. So overall, as a city, our grading was appropriate. When you split it out, maybe we didn't do quite as well, but we were really on is that we came into the year thinking that we were going to still be in a positive aspect. We were still going to be having strong conversations. We were going to outperform the rest of the country, because we knew that a lot of the country was in for a rocky ride, and we did it.
Yeah.
Yay, us. Awesome. Next up is the second biggest buzzword of the last few years.
Yep.
The inventory word. What is our inventory looking like? How did we do in terms of that? Our prediction.
Yeah.
And Samuel, we totally missed the mark in this. I think the entire country missed the mark in this, so I'm not going to put us just on the chopping block, because this was something that really impacted everybody. Yeah. Our prediction was that the home inventory was going to remain relatively flat, possibly a slight improvement.
We didn't do that, unfortunately.
No. In fact, we got really, really beat up in the inventory.
Yeah. Well, remember, inventory is essentially basic economics, supply and demand, and buyers being the demand and the supply being homes for sale. We saw homes come down because sellers had low interest rates, and so they wanted to just hold on to it. And then buyers, we thought, were going to stop wanting to purchase as interest rates kind of went up, or at least slowed that demand down.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we projected that. You know, you think just basic economics with interest rates going up, it would affect that.
Sure.
And it didn't.
You know, I think the biggest place that interest rates affected our inventory, right? And we had a lot of things going on in the past in 2023. Some of them that were very much curveballs and really caught us by surprise. But people were so resistant to give up their interest rates. They were so resistant to, well, we'll make this property work just a little bit longer. We can squeeze it out one more time. So there were a lot of people that if they didn't have to move, sure, it felt comfortable to stay in their 3% interest rate versus looking at a 7.5%, 8% interest rate. That's a big difference. Some of them, it was because they couldn't afford the move up house, right?
Yeah.
They just couldn't afford that aspect. I also had a large sector of my clients that they wanted to play the market a little bit. They wanted to hold on to whatever they had because of the interest rate and to keep that
As a rental.
cheap money as a rental. And those were people that had never really thought about having a real estate portfolio at all. But that way they felt like they were still keeping that. They weren't losing that cheap money as they moved on to their next property, which once again, it's a phenomenal strategy for people. But when it comes to our inventory, if that's not coming back on the market, the inventory is hurt.
Yeah.
Now, overall, our inventory in all of the neighborhoods was down 25%.
Which made sense. I mean, like, if you look at the last 3 years that we've really had, each year, normally what you see pre-pandemic is inventory goes up in our seasonality. So like winter months, we typically go up to 5 to 6 months of inventory. Now we like kept low in that winter months the last 3 years and have still gone down. And so, yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is we have to remember a couple different points to that. That's 25% less than last year.
And we were down 25%.
We didn't have enough last year. So there's two sides of that. Number one, it's really drastic. But on the same token, we have to understand that smaller number differences make a bigger impact, just like we were saying in terms of that. But we had 25%. In fact, I can remember times in this particular market where I pulled the inventory for every one of our sellers before we go on. And there was a moment of this past year where I was looking for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath in Bucktown to show comparisons to a seller. And that particular market, when I was looking, was down 53% in terms of inventory based on the year before.
Yep.
That's huge, and that in itself, I would say the inventory has so much more to do with how the rest of the market really prevails. It impacts everything else we do from that perspective. Now, if we separate that out based on our urban neighborhoods and our downtown, our urban neighborhoods were down 30% overall, which is, once again, that's a really big number. And our downtown markets?
We're only down 16%.
So
again, remember eating up that inventory that we kind of talked about.
Yeah. So more inventory.
It's good to see.
Totally. It's great to see. But also understanding those areas that didn't have, our Northside neighborhoods had less inventory and they saw more price appreciation. Yep. It's always going to see that. The less homes we have to sell and the more people that want to buy them, the stronger the pricing will prevail.
Yeah. And the downtown market is at finally a normalized rate.
For certain.
I mean, it's at 6 months inventory, which is what we want to see in a standard market.
We're hoping for everywhere.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, like even during the pandemic, it went up to what it was at the housing recession.
Yes.
It was at that rate.
Yeah.
That's insane. So we like gobbled it all up, which is good.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that pricing is going down there because of it.
No, it's
because you're
normalization of the market.
Yeah. But also, I think the other point that we need to also make is even though we're down in inventory this year, we are still outperformed. We sold more homes than pre-pandemic.
Sure.
So remember 2021 was like the big year and then we keep on going down. But
for certain. No, and it's so relative.
Relative. Yeah, exactly.
So relative. In fact, I was at a seminar the other day and I remember
the volume, right?
The volume of the country.
Yeah.
And I'm going to butcher these numbers a little bit. I don't have them in front of me, but essentially it said that
we won't hold you accountable.
In 2020, the entire country did about $97 billion worth of real estate.
Yep.
In 2021, that number went up to 23 billion. So that was the year that we saw the really big rise.
Yep.
In 2022, it just filtered a little bit off of that number.
Yep.
So it was right around there again. And then in 2023, it was year to date, but that number was back into the high 60s.
Yeah.
So we did, as a country, half of the volume of last previous years. But here's the kicker. We then compared that number, the 67 billion, to not to 2018. We compared it to 2011.
Oh, dang.
The worst year of the housing crisis.
Housing crisis.
Yeah. That number was 37 billion. So we were still, even in the toughest year that we've seen, we were still double almost what we were at the peak of that. So it's all relative, right?
Yeah, totally.
Anyways, okay, so let's move on from that. This is another hot topic.
This has been 2023 interest rates.
Interest rates. Enough said. There's nothing really to say. I think we actually did really well on this, despite a tremendous amount of odds against us. We always joke and say that nobody knows what's going to happen with interest rates. The Fed might know.
The Fed doesn't even know.
No, you might have a little bit more education, but the reality is they don't know.
Yeah.
It's all a little bit of a crapshoot. And so anybody that tells you they know exactly what's going to happen, even the smartest economists in the world, they don't.
Which actually, they're doing a really good job. I'm like actually very impressed because at the beginning of the year, we were like, oh no, they reacted too late. And it actually is coming in as a soft landing. We were curious that it would happen, and we didn't think it could.
Right? No, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more, I think, about the economy when we get into the consumer confidence aspect. But like, kudos on 2023 in terms of the economic status of things, because I think that we really outperformed. Anyway, so for interest rates, our predictions was that it was going to be very volatile throughout the year. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think we said a roller coaster ride of interest rates, but that we thought the ending of 2023 was going to be similar to the ending of 2022. Yeah. We hit the roller coaster ride for certain, because this year was, honestly, I felt like we were tap dancing on a hot plate.
Yes.
Like, we got
all right.
We got flipped the bird by interest rates.
Yeah.
So we ended 2022 at 6.42 as the interest rate.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where we ended the year. Now, once again, we're not making it specific to the property type, to somebody's specific situation, and if it's a condo or a single family or somebody's credit or anything like that. The average interest rate at the end of the year was 6.42.
Yep.
Now, we ended 2023 at 7.03.
Yes.
Which realistically, we're splitting margins at this point.
Yeah.
It's actually about a 9.5% differential.
Yes.
But based on the roller coaster ride that we were on, we ended the year a lot closer and a lot better than we thought to. But let's remember, we actually saw 6 weeks of price improvements at the end of the year.
Yes.
I mean, part of it had to do with the fact that the world was at a really not great state in terms of a lot of other things, let's be honest. But the reality is we saw the price improvements in the mortgage rates, which also ticked up our
activity.
Interest for certain.
We're definitely seeing a lot more buyers coming out of the woodworks. Yeah. But we still do have people who are on the sidelines. Like, I have people who are still like, I'm just waiting for interest rates to go down, and then maybe this is a 2024 purchase or a 2025 purchase.
Totally.
I mean, like, some people are on the sidelines really that far out.
Very true. Very true. Some people are waiting for that interest rate, despite everything that we've been saying, that
pricing will go up, and so it may change the dynamic of what you're actually looking to do in that future.
So your monthly payment might be exactly the same.
Yeah.
But yes, that's absolutely part of it. So anyway, so we saw a 9.5% increase in the interest rates. We had thought that it was going to be relatively volatile and fairly similar. I'm going to give us for what we went through, I'm giving us a solid B+ on that.
Yeah. Totally. And it went all the way up to 8%. So luckily we had the last 3 weeks of steady drops.
We were going for probably a C- on that, and then the economy helped out.
Yes.
What was let's see if you can remember back on this, the highest interest rate that you saw somebody lock in the past year?
The highest one that I had was 8.4.
8.4. I was going to say, I think I was at an 8.25.
Yeah.
So we were well into the eights. And what was it, if I remember correctly, that was the highest interest rates we had seen in over 20 years. Now, this is a very hot topic for me because there's so much to it. But overall, home sales. How have home sales done in the past year? Now, just to define this is the number of transactions, number of closed transactions. Mm-hmm. Why this is such a hot topic for me is because everybody knows the media is a huge topic for me, and this is the one that they love to do a little fuzzy math on.
Well, they see the transactions going down, and then they use that as kind of a clickbait scare tactic versus, hey, pricing is stable, and that.
Exactly.
And it's almost like predicting the accuracy of it.
Our prediction was that we were expecting that home sales were going to decrease slightly from inflated numbers in 2022.
And they did.
They probably they decreased more than we originally thought they were. They decreased overall. We've seen the entire city that we talked about is down 25%.
Yep.
The Northside urban neighborhoods were down 27%, and then the downtown, as you said, only down 17%.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting question, we expected it to go down, those numbers of what we're down are very similar to what the inventory was down. So one may
Yes.
ask, if we have 25% less homes to sell people and our home sales go down 25%, is there a correlation?
Yeah. It essentially was demand was out, like supply was matching
We didn't have enough
demand.
homes to sell people.
Yeah.
We had a
So-
lot of people that ended up stepping back from the market because they were just tired of looking for
Waiting
nothing.
and seeing nothing that they liked
Sure.
or anything like that.
Yeah, and it
and
got
then
to be
also
an-
being priced out.
For certain. And I think that's the important part with the media. As we always say, we have a lot of respect for what they do. Their motives are going to be different than ours. Their motives are
They're a business as
they're
well.
a business. They're selling ad space, which is totally fine. But if their story is that home sales are down 30% in Bucktown, they're probably not going to tell you in the big bold print that we had 27% less homes to sell people. Which in
Yes.
theory, when you think about it that way,
And that price was stable.
so when you think about
So
it that
it's
way, it's
full story.
It's a full story. But overall, we were correct. We just, once again, we were slightly off because we missed the mark on inventory. And by missing the mark on inventory, we just didn't know that the home sales were going to go down. But we saw the direction that we expected because we knew that so many home people had changed their housing environments in 2022 that was a natural thing that was going to happen in the year.
Yep.
Days on market.
So last year we said that days on market will increase.
Because we
How
thought
did yeah.
we
Again,
thought demand was going to go down a little bit because we thought inventory was going to.
So if you thought inventory was going to like slightly uptick, of course we're going to think the days on market is going to, just because it's going to have a little bit of a lag.
Yeah. But by losing the inventory, we lost that as well.
Yeah. Created frenzies in a lot of ours. I mean, like it was super competitive still.
Yeah, especially in the first
Especially
half of the
spring.
year.
Yeah.
Especially in the first half of the year, right? We saw a ton of seasonality in what we did. We did have some very, very heated multiple bids. We've become more experts in that type of navigation. Every year we refine and hone our skills with that even more. I actually, this past weekend, I was in, it's a little bit of a strange time to see multiple bids, but I'm still in them right now. And I feel like our skill set in them is really, really strong in terms of finding creative ways to appeal to buyers, to appeal to the seller situation and just trying to separate yourself from the pack, which is something that we're obviously trying to do. But it's interesting to think about if our inventory wasn't so decimated, that the market dynamic would have been very different, in my opinion. Like,
super different.
We would have been 100% at the end of the day. Yeah. But no, it was one of those things that our days on market eked down ever so slightly. The overall city went down, what do we see? 5%. It was 2 days difference. Last year, it was 36 days on average overall city. This year was down to 34. So pretty much a wash on that. We saw very, very similar. The Northside neighborhoods went down 1 day. There was a 1 day differential.
Okay.
Crazy.
Which it actually was low to start with.
Yes.
I mean, 28 days, like in the scheme of, I mean, again,
under 30 days is low.
What are
as an average
30 years of real estate between us too? No, 40 years.
I was going to say 40. I appreciate
40.
you making me
Dang.
younger than I am.
Okay, so 40 years of real estate experience between the two of us. This is I've never seen days on market below 30 days.
No.
Ever.
So the Northside neighborhoods. Then meanwhile,
the fact that
the downtown neighborhood's going to be a little bit higher. But it still went down. It went down 14%. It was originally 61 days last year, and it went down to 52 days, which once again shows that positivity downtown.
Yeah, I mean, like even in the spring market when we had a couple of transactions down there, all of them were in multiple offers.
Certain price points for
certain price points.
Yeah.
And that's also the other story about kind of days on market is there are multiple stories behind it.
Yes.
There are people who were overpricing their properties and it languished on the market. We saw that. We saw continuous price reductions, especially in the second half of the year.
And it's what we said. When we sat here a year ago and we said, if we deal with any inventory issues, for the majority of the market, there are definitely offsets of this market, but the majority of the market, because we don't have enough homes to sell people, if you are ever going to err on a pricing or a valuation, err on the more aggressive side and let the market figure it out. If there are not enough homes for people, that is always going to be the benefit to get us to where we need to get to.
Yeah. But even like examples from this year, I mean, like, remember when we listed, was it Chestnut and Wolcott on the same weekend, same price point, same everything? And literally the dynamic between the two was stark difference.
Yes.
I mean,
even things that we couldn't quite put
and we
our
were
finger
like,
on.
this is going to sell fast. And it It didn't.
The crystal ball
it's so
was
shocking
very-
what actually took off this year.
Yeah, the crystal ball was very foggy in Q4.
Yeah, that's true.
And that was the reality is that I was in several multiple bids on several properties, and then other ones it was a struggle to get people in, even if they were, some of the markets just had some different dynamic for certain.
Yeah, we had more transactions fall apart this year, which actually probably helped increase the days on market, but it's actually interesting that it went down. I mean, like you would think.
No, it's a great point. The reality is in these markets where there's so many buyers out to buy these properties, and they're throwing pasta against the wall left and right to see what works.
Sticks.
Yeah, they don't want to miss out on things, and it's the thing that we tell our sellers is that so much about navigating multiple bid situations is not necessarily about the highest offer.
It's getting
the most
to the transaction
committed offer who is committed to getting to the finish line. We saw a lot of stuff fall apart because somebody 3 days later goes, "Oh my God, I really overpaid for something," or "Oh my God, I didn't think that through."
Yeah, and then they get the inspection report back, and they're like, "What? I have to spend all this money now?"
I waived every contingency I have.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. In fact, it was funny. I was writing an offer for a buyer in a multiple bid in December. It was only 3, so not as competitive. But it was one of those things that I knew our offer wasn't as competitive, but my cover letter to the agent so much relied on the fact that these guys weren't putting forward a number that they were going to
be scared about
in 4 days or 5 days. They weren't doing all these things that they may be looking at in other offers because we had so talked through it, hoping that having a seller really kind of read through and understand like, okay, they're putting forward what they're absolutely committed to. And maybe we have a shiny offer over here, but maybe there isn't the amount of traction with it. So
yeah. Did you get it?
I didn't get that one. But
it was a good attempt.
It was a good attempt, and I have a strong suspicion that we have a lot of time. They were okay. They were okay to lose it. We weren't in a position where it made sense at all to throw a Hail Mary, but it's one that I have a inkling of an idea it may come back to us.
Gotcha.
One of those things.
Okay.
And even the agent said it may come back to us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No.
So, and the last one, the one that we always lament over. Oh my God. Because it's one of those things that, yes, there absolutely is a tracking method to it. So, yes, we can say it, but it's so influenced. I don't want to say influential because it's actually influenced. I don't think influential is the right word.
Well, consumer confidence is how consumers feel about what's going on in the economy. So that is.
So we're measuring
really
feelings, people.
Yeah.
Measuring feelings.
And if I could measure how happy I was or sad I was, oh God, I could actually fix it.
So consumer confidence, what we had predicted after we once again lamented on how hard it was to discuss and project on consumer confidence, we thought that it would actually decrease slightly in 2023 because there was so much
negative talk
in the marketplace, specifically the economy in terms of where we were at and where we were going. Remember, everything was
we had a
recession,
really bad stock market that year. I mean, like interest rates were rising. Like there was just so much going on.
Yeah, there was so much talk of the recession. I remember we talked so much about the fact that recessions are bad. They normalize our markets and they're not a bad thing. There was so much discussion mid-year of a soft landing and this and that. And can our economy try and outperform this? But going into the year, there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of doom and gloom. The housing market, you remember kind of the media hike at the end of 2022? Like, are we on the brink of another housing crisis? Well, clearly we passed that one. But no, and that's where I said at the beginning of this cast, I actually think that how the economy has navigated this year is pretty stinking impressive.
I mean, the fact that we rose 6.4% GDP in Q3, that is on top of combating inflation and all that stuff. I'm like, oh my God, it's insane. We are spending so much money. How?
For all the things that got thrown our way, is that I think that we ended the year at a much better point than most people, and consumer confidence shows that.
Exactly.
So so we were off on that. The actual
so
metric, is that consumer confidence is up 10% in 2023. Not a huge percent, but enough.
I mean, that's a big jump. I mean, especially with everything that has gone on.
With everything that has gone on, absolutely.
So
no, I think
I'm actually impressed with that number.
This is one of those topics that I am super glad that we were outperformed on.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'd rather the world be ending where it is, and Samuel and I have been wrong in our prediction than the opposite.
All I have to say is thank you, Taylor Swift. Thank you, Beyonce. Thank you, Barbie. Thank you, 2020. The women of 2023 like
for certain.
rocked it.
Oh my God, for certain. So if we're gonna put ourselves on that chopping block,
Yeah, totally.
we were pretty correct on pricing.
Yep.
We totally missed the mark on inventory. Interest rates, despite a very, very challenging year, we were pretty spot on. Number of home sales, we expected it to decrease. We weren't quite as on point with how far it was going to decrease, but we were pretty close on that. Days on market, we thought we were going to see a slight increase. We saw a slight decrease. That's tied exactly to that inventory.
Yep.
And consumer confidence, we were a little bit off in that, but both of us are very happy to have failed that topic.
I actually think this is our best year of predictions.
I think we did.
Literally,
all
we
things
did
considered,
so good this year.
For what got thrown our way.
Pat on the back.
For what got thrown our way, I think we did pretty stinking good.
That was our look into the past. Now to the future.
I feel like I should light some incense or something.
So 24 is going to be a presidential year. So let's start off with that. So there's going to be kind of something that we're throwing into the ring already, and it's going to be a hostile, I think.
So remind me, how many markets have you been in with presidential elections?
This is my fourth. Yeah, fourth.
I'm going on my sixth.
Yeah.
So there's certain things that we know right off the bat. Part of the market will be related to how contentious.
And it will be contentious this year.
Yeah,
and we
exactly.
already know that.
We know it's going to be contentious. We know there's going to be a lot of drama around it. And the more drama and the more terse nature around the election, the more impact on the real estate. But the impact is always different than our consumers think.
Yes.
We create it. We create the pause. I talk about it all the time. And it's not just in elections, but we see it a lot in elections.
Totally.
Samuel and I will spend probably the 3 months specifically leading up to the beginning of November being faced with the number one question of how will which candidate winning impact the real estate market?
Yes, that is always the number one question every year.
And the answer is very simple.
It won't.
It won't.
It won't.
People don't like to hear that. It could, right? As we say, it could longer term.
Yeah, it may have a dent in that fall market or that winter market, like where it slows down, but then it normalizes.
Right? You may have a slower December, but no, realistically, we always say that the immediate results of the election will have minimal impact on the actual market. Yeah. But where the impact will be is that 3 months or so leading up to the market where everyone is obsessing on that answer. When people come to us and they ask us that, it means that they're overthinking that reaction. By overthinking that reaction, they're immediately creating the pause. They're pausing their real estate decisions to try and find out more of what they think is going to happen. And that pause can actually have some impact.
Yeah.
So a lot of our stuff, thought process will be based on knowing that that's coming.
Yeah, putting it in. So let's start with home pricing.
Home pricing.
Where do we think this is going to end up at?
Home pricing in 2024. So based off of those pieces, I think that we will see a positive spring. Mm-hmm. The inventory issue is a long-term fix in our markets.
Super, yeah. It's
not something that's going to happen immediately. It's going to take more than a year, more than a drop in the bucket. It's going to take some time to get past. What that means for us is that our inventory will be down compared to our demand. And we've been talking about it very specifically for the last half of the year. As those interest rates start to come back, as they start to get a little bit better, alleviate, we will absolutely see more and more buyers come. Yeah. So if we have more buyers come, the market in the spring should be relatively strong. I think that we will see some strength in our pricing in the first half of the year. 100%. I have very, very little doubt in that. And I am fairly consistent in my thought process that in the second half of the year, there will be a lot of pause. There will be a lot of kind of tenseness. Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot of stalemate, so to say.
Totally.
So what does that mean at the end of the year? I'm going to say by the end of 2024 that we see a slight uptick in home prices. But I think we're going to see more of an increase up front, but I think it's going to be pulled back. I do think that it's going to be elevated at the end of the year, but I think it's going to be minimal.
I think that's a really good prediction. I have a feeling we're still going to see positive appreciation. I think it's going to be very light though. I think it's going to be very flat. So similar to like what we were talking about. I think on the north, so when we talk about our numbers, we talk about the north side and like the downtown market versus like Chicago land as a general consensus. Yes. I think Chicago land as a broader picture will see appreciation. I'm curious to see what we see on the north side. I think we will see a little bit, but I think it'll be similar to this year where it was like up 0.2%.
Sure.
Right? Like, because even this year we had the same thing happen where we thought it was going to uptick, but we look at the overall market versus just our little neighborhoods. And
so on that note, just to dive a little bit deeper, and I know this is your hood, what are your thoughts on downtown?
Oh gosh. I think downtown is making strides to come back. I think what we need to see in order for pricing to go up is I think we need to see the commercial space to come back. I think that is like the number one thing that is really hurting the downtown market. West Loop is obviously the one downtown market that I think we're seeing outpace a lot of it, but even that is starting to get really expensive. And I think even over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of people transition from that market to like Wicker Park or Logan or Avondale and kind of go up that corridor, the Milwaukee corridor. So I'll be curious to see like what actually happens. But I think our downtown market is probably just going to be flatlined, or it may go down still a little bit.
Yeah, I think for them, I think it's kind of like what we talked about. I think it's relative to what it's done. It's still rebuilding. I think you're absolutely spot on with regards to the commercial. The office space too, right? We need to get more life back in our downtown, and it's happening. It's just
like the restaurants, it's the pull.
It's happening. It's just a little bit slower.
What made
so I think fun. That the numbers could, I think the numbers could still be down there, but I think it's going to be in a positive momentum, right? Yeah. Better than it's been.
Yeah, I think also the other thing about downtown is they need to look at rental rates, because I think rental caps are actually putting in an effect right down on a lot of those buildings. I think they need to work on, unfortunately, hallway space and lobby space. Right. They need to like update some of these, especially in River North. All the River North like condo buildings were built in 2000 to 2006.
They need some makeup.
So it's time. Yeah. Botox. Come on. Like that's what they need.
We are Botoxing buildings in 2024.
Yeah. But I think they also need the other big thing about downtown is we need to really look at the assessments and what we're doing proactively to make sure that building codes aren't violated, that anything is going on, because the Miami issue that happened a couple of years ago is really affecting pricing downtown, because even our listing at 100 East Walton, we couldn't get financing on it. So we ended up renting it out, and that brings pricing down because, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are very strict with what they're doing.
Well, and so much of that is really impacting our buildings that were built in the late 60s and 70s, right? That's that huge impact that he's talking about. And we have, especially along our lakefront, we have a lot of buildings that were built in that era that, as I always say, when I walk into a building that was built late 60s, early to mid 70s, this is a building that either hopefully just had everything done or is on the brink of having everything done just because of the age of it. Yeah. But you're right. We're seeing that the lending side of things are much more critical of that aspect.
And it's going to shift it. So it needs to be less of a reactive thing that the and be more proactive versus like, so that we can actually get pricing up, because that is going to be the hard thing. And it's going to probably have a short-term effect on it because it's going to be higher HOAs or whatnot. But I mean, that's I think the one thing that is really hurting the downtown market.
Sure.
And the steps forward is how do we get past this next point?
Agreed. And that's, I mean, once again, not to pat ourselves on our back, that's so much of the education that we do with our buyers, because they're going to say, I like this place, I like this location, I like the gym, I like the lobby. They're not going to say, oh, longer term, what's coming down my way,
a facade project, you have like all that stuff.
So home prices, as we said, I think we're fairly similar.
Yeah.
I love when Samuel and I agree on things. It's just fun to think that we do over them.
Exactly.
Okay, now this is one we did very poorly on. So inventory. What is inventory going to look like in 2024?
I'm going to go out and say it's going to be the same.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to go down, because I don't think it can go down any more. to be honest.
Don't say that. It can always happen.
You really can't take anything more off.
Right.
So I'm hoping that it's probably going to be about the same.
So you're going to say it's about the same.
I don't think it's going to increase at all.
I'm going to go a little bit against you. Just a little bit.
Okay.
I think we're going to see a little bit of a tick up in that, because I feel like this year it was very easy for people to sit tight and say, we can outlast this.
Yeah.
Right. I have clients myself that were hoping to do something and then finally threw in the towel and said, you know what, at those interest rates, it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. I think those people, if we can get those interest rates down and we can start seeing things more sixes, and there's been a little bit of discussion, is if any point do we scratch that 5 surface? I think if we see anything like that, I think that will feel like a little bit of a light to a lot of people who will then say, let's move on. Now, it's still going to make for a very undersupplied market. I agree with you on that. We're going to be undersupplied because I think that puts more buyers back in. But I think that our inventory low point, minus world catastrophe, which God knows we have had a ton of that lately, but I do think that we're going to see a hair more inventory based on the fact that I think, and this is just part of this is from who we follow and all those things. Part of this is just my feeling towards Q4 of people that I had come to me saying, hey, we can't fit in this house anymore. We can't do this anymore. We did it for the year. If things get a little bit better for us, we're going to look to do that. So I think we're going to see a little bit more.
Yeah. So are we talking about like the amount of the amount of properties on the market for sale? Or are we talking about
overall
like the
inventory
supply of inventory?
I'm going to say overall inventory of homes at the end of the year.
Gotcha. Okay. So month supply of inventory, I think, is going to stay the same, because I think that is going to outpace
because that's going to be with the number of
I think
buyers.
It's going to be supply and demand.
I'll agree with that.
Inventory, the amount of homes coming on the market.
Wait, Samuel's changing his answer.
Sorry.
All good.
Inventory, the amount of properties that will probably come on the market will go up, but I think the amount of demand is going to
go up too.
Pace that.
Agreed.
So yes, I agree with what you were saying.
Awesome.
All right. So
we both agree with the sense that we do expect to see a little bit more in the new year, but we do think that there's going to be enough demand to keep it feeling pretty tight in the marketplace. For certain.
Yeah, I think it'll still be pressured.
Interest rates.
Essentially, interest rates have gone down for the last 3 weeks, and I think they're going to still go down, especially since the Federal Reserve is talking about doing 5 cuts next year, which is a lot different than what their initial talk was to just maintain.
Yep. But important note, when the Fed talks about cutting rates, there's a lot of...
It's not mortgage rates.
It's not the mortgage rates.
It's the 10-year treasury. It's the long-term effects of it.
And that typically has
a correlation
pressure on the interest rates, but it's not the same. So if you hear that, if you see the news reading that says Fed decides to cut rates, it doesn't automatically mean your interest rates went down. Yeah,
and similar with when they were going up, it was, hey, we've already baked in these.
We've already been pricing.
Yeah, we've already baked in the mortgage rates into knowing that there's going to be an increase in the next Fed meeting.
Exactly.
So I think they're going to go down. I don't know how far they're going to go down. I don't think they're going to go crazy low, but we'll see. Hopefully it would be in the 5s. That would be lovely.
I mean, my wish, right? We're not talking about predictions. My wish is that we can scratch into the 5s towards the end of the year. Now, the other thing to note, right, bringing the presidential election aspect back into this, it is very typical to see during presidential election years that the interest rates improve over the course of the year.
Yeah,
right?
They want to keep it consistent.
They don't want to offend anybody, right? Yeah. A lot of people will vote based on their personal priorities. Yeah. And they feel like if something is working against them, they like to hold that against the people making the decision. So we tend to see the interest rates are better during an election year. So we know we've got that going for us. We know we have what the Fed is stating. Yeah. I am going on record. I do think we're going to see rates lower towards the end of the year. I'll also go on record to say I don't think it's going to feel as much of a wild ride. Yeah. As this year. This year felt like, gosh, we were buckling up, and you know, I got to the point where I felt like.
My favorite thing was when it like literally dropped like 0.2 and we're like, bye. It was like, go.
There were moments that I felt like all of the podcasts that I listened to on the interest rates, it sounded like the Charlie Brown teacher. Yeah. Because it was like, like it felt, I felt numb to it at certain points of this year because it was so reactive and I had to keep my own heart pressure at a normal spot. But I don't think it's going to be as reactive. I think it's going to end up more beneficial for people. I feel very positive that we're going to get down to the low 6s. And my hope would be that we past that, but that's more of just a hope, because I know that will put a lot of people in better situations.
Totally.
Number of transactions, number of home sales.
I think it's going to go down. I think inventory is going to go up. Then I'm just contradicting what I literally just said, so maybe that isn't the case. See, these are really hard to make predictions.
These are hard to make predictions, right? There's a reason we get some of this wrong. And like I said, Samuel and I don't collaborate on any of this before. You're seeing our first discussion on this so that you can get all the ins and outs of it. I think, I'll take the lead on this one.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to see the number of home sales tick up with the inventory ticking up. So if we can get that inventory to tick up a little bit, because we know we're still going to be undersupplied. Yep. If we can get that inventory, we should see a slight tick up. If we've got all those people that are sitting on the fence waiting for those interest rates to come down, that in theory, if that inventory goes up, we should see a slight uptick in the number of home sales. But I think there's going to be a huge tie, just like there was this year. That's where we were so far off in the tie between those two. Plus, we know that this past year was a little bit slower for those things. So in theory, it should put it. Now, the question mark in my mind on that is how the second half of the year plays out.
I agree with you, because obviously in my theory of the talking about inventory, that should be my thought process.
It's in theory, it's how paralyzed will our market get from the election?
And that's like,
the question
that's
mark.
throwing in the wrench
Because it could
on
be
my brain.
really
I'm like,
bad.
Yeah, just because I think this year is going to be such a contentious one that I'm curious to see what actually happens with it. But
yeah, no, the whole social media aspect I think is going to be awful.
Yeah,
just awful.
Well, and especially like with AI coming out, and I think like there's going to be a lot of false news, and so I think it's going to have a really big impact this year. But again, if anything happens,
if the war with Israel and Palestine has shown us anything about fake news and how corrupt that whole aspect can be, I think that's a precursor of what's to come in the new year, I think.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to agree with you on the inventory going up, but I think also the transactions going up.
Yep.
Because I think it's going to kind of pace it out.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be a big difference. I think it'll be
minimal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'll be very similar to this year.
Yeah.
Days on market.
So many of these are ancestrally tied together. So it's like, if we're a little bit doubtful on one, it kind of tailspins into the rest. Days on market.
Days on market. So days on market, I think will probably be around the same. Yeah. I think we keep on ticking down, but I think there's going to be a year where we need to see it tick up. Mm-hmm. I think downtown we'll see it go down. I think the urban neighborhoods, like we talked about, I think we'll stay either flat or probably see. Hopefully. I think it'll be flat.
I agree. I mean, I think realistically, as we look at it, I think that until we get enough inventory, I think there's not an ability for it to really change a ton. Yeah. So as long as we're dealing with this, a little bit of what we call the inventory crisis, I think that the downtown is going to, continue to move at its own. But as we talk about, even with downtown being around 60 days, that's still a fast market for our downtown market. Yeah. So if that kind of stays the same, the neighborhoods are going to be undersupplied, as we talked about. I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to say that we're going to be pretty much where we're at. Once again, the $1 million question is how the election impacts it at the end of the year.
Yeah, we need inventory. Honestly, I've read like a couple opinion pieces, and obviously they're opinion pieces, but it was like literally talking about how we need to take an idea from California, because otherwise we're going to end up like them, because there's not a ton of new construction going on, and that is what's affecting home prices and everything. And I was even talking about it with somebody yesterday, where there's another rental building going up in like Lincoln Park, right across from the Apple store. And I was like, we do not need more rentals. No. What we need is aldermen to say, look, if you're building in my zone, we need more, we don't need more luxury condos or luxury apartments. We need either A, affordable housing on the lower end, or B, more condos, and not ultra luxury condos.
Right.
It's
the hardest part, and I've talked to enough developers about this, the hardest part
pricing.
Is that
costs.
The profit margins are non-existent right now between interest rates, the cost of land, the cost of labor, the cost of supplies. Developers don't have enough incentive. So basically what the city needs to create some taxing advantages for our developers so that they can bind their profit margins in other areas so that they can put more inventory back in our product. Our lack of new construction over the last few years is really playing against us in certain markets. And I agree with you. It's not, we have a ton of luxury right now, but we need some Just normal condos.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last one, our thought process on consumer confidence.
Consumer confidence.
12 months from now. So 12 months from now, the election will be behind us, but we've got a lot of months in between.
It probably will be flat because this year was first year out of COVID. It was like this.
I think we only mentioned that word like 2 or 3 times this whole discussion.
Shocking. It's weird. I mean, and I'm like wondering when we're going to be back to normal.
Yeah.
Like normal, especially in our housing market. But I think last year was all about services.
Yeah.
And it was about travel and it was about all that. And so that is why we saw a big boom in the economy. Mm-hmm. And I think people were still really strong. I feel like right now we're seeing savings accounts going down. We're still seeing all of that.
We're spending.
With inflation, I think what happened last year is really going to affect what's going on this year. And then with the presidential election, I just think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty because of the contentiousness of it. So even the people who are, again, we talk about the people who don't listen to the media,
right?
They're going to somehow see the media no matter what. And so I think
you can't hide from it anymore.
You can't hide from it in a presidential year. And so I think that's going to have the ultimate effect with it. So it'll be curious to see, but I'd probably say it's going to be flat for this beginning of the year, maybe down towards the end.
So my thoughts on consumer confidence, it's obviously, we're just finishing up a very heavy, very terse year, a lot of world events. We're on the brink of an election year, which no matter how we shape it is going to be very intense. We've already talked about how social media will strengthen the voices of the candidates and create a lot of confusion for a lot of people. We've seen how AI is going to impact that. And I think that that's going to be an interesting thing to monitor as we get through the year. World events are obviously at a very unusual spot as well. There's a lot going on overseas that is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on us. All of that stuff is happening while our economy is actually doing surprisingly well. And that's a huge crossroads because most consumers, right, wrong, or indifferent, are a little bit more selfishly motivated, right? How is it impacting me? But we're saying things are being impacted while we're at the tip of what's going to have a lot of things thrown at us. So I'm going to go on a little bit of a ledge here and say that I think that the two at the end of the year will balance one another.
Yep.
Is that all the negativity, which would tend to bring our confidence down, will counterbalance how our economy tends to do. And I think that there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. I think this past year was a really strong year for our economy. I think it set us up to be doing well things. And so between the two, world events versus the economy, and the election, insert eye roll here, I think that we're going to be at a very similar point with consumer confidence.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap it up so we have it all in one place. Okay. Home prices.
What did I say again?
Home prices, wrapping it up. We both said that we thought that we were going to see a slight increase in home prices.
Or flat.
You said or flat. I said slight increase. So slight increase or flat. Inventory.
The amount of homes on the market are going to go up.
We both think they're going to go up, not substantially.
The month supply of inventory will hover around the same.
Because we're going to have more demand as well. Yeah. Interest rates, we both agreed that we are going to see them go down in the new year. The question is how much? We definitely both agreed into the 6s.
Totally.
The question is can we scratch that surface lower? The number of home sales, we both said that they were going to be even, which is going to outperform what we saw. So we're going to see pretty much even in terms of the number of home sales. And I think we both said maybe a little bit up if that inventory goes up.
Yeah.
Days on market, we both said that they were going to remain pretty flat.
And then downtown would be a little bit lower.
Downtown is still going to be down, but it's going to start to improve from what we tend to see. And consumer confidence, I think we both said that we are expecting to be at a pretty similar space at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Well, we did it.
Let's hope 2024 is how we predicted.
Right. We'll hold ourselves accountable 1 year from now.
We'll see 2024 what happens with the presidential election. I think that's going to be the biggest part about it.
1,000%.
Oof.
Until next time, Chicago.